Ngozi, you have to bring the school fees. We can't keep making exceptions. I'm sorry.
Thank you, Leo. I will never forget this. Never forget you.
You are a good man, Leo, and I will never forget what you did for me. But the truth is that I cannot see myself settling down with a mechanic anymore.
In a small dusty street where cars break down every day, there lived a kind mechanic named Leo, who worked very hard and loved only one girl with all his heart. He did not have much money, but he gave everything he had just to help her go to school and become successful. Because he believed that one day they would live a happy life together. He trusted her, believed in her, and he never thought she would change. But sometimes when people rise, they forget the hands that helped them up. And this is a story about love, sacrifice, and a painful truth that not every good heart is rewarded.
In a small street where people fixed cars by the roadside and dust filled the air every afternoon, there worked a young mechanic named Leo who was known for being calm, kind, and very hard-working, even though life had never really been easy for him. Every day he woke up early, opened his small workshop, and spent long hours repairing cars just to earn enough money to survive. Leo was not rich at all, but he had something very important in his life, and that was a young woman named Ngozi, who had been his girlfriend for many years. Ngozi was still in school, and she had big dreams of working in an office, wearing nice clothes, and living a better life than the one she had always known. Leo believed in her dreams completely, and he made a quiet decision in his heart that he would do everything he could to help her succeed. School was not easy for Ngozi because the fees were high, and her family could not always support her. So many times she felt like giving up. But Leo would never allow that to happen because he kept encouraging her and reminding her that her future was bright. He began to work harder than before, taking extra repair jobs and saving every little money he could find. And most of that money went directly into paying Ngozi's school fees and buying her books. Even when things became difficult for him, Leo never complained, because seeing Ngozi continue her education made him happy, and he believed that one day all the struggle would be worth it. Sometimes he would go the whole day without eating properly, but he would still send money to Ngozi and ask her if she had everything she needed for school. Ngozi appreciated him deeply during those times, and she often told him that she would never forget what he was doing for her, promising that when she finished her studies, she would stand by him and they would build a better life together. Those words gave Leo even more strength, and he held on to them like a promise that could never be broken. As time went on, Leo continued to sacrifice his comfort, his time, and his energy, all because he believed in Ngozi and the future they had planned together. And in his heart, he was already looking forward to the day she would graduate, not knowing that life was quietly preparing a different path ahead of them. The day finally came when all the long nights, the hard work, and the many sacrifices began to show their results, because Ngozi completed her studies and graduated successfully. And it was one of the happiest moments Leo had ever experienced in his life. Even though he could not afford expensive clothes or big gifts, he made sure he was present on that day, standing quietly among the crowd with a proud smile on his face as he watched the woman he had supported walk forward to receive her certificate. After the ceremony, Ngozi ran to him with excitement, her face full of joy, and she hugged him tightly as if she truly understood everything he had done for her. And in that moment, Leo felt like every sacrifice he had made was worth it, because he believed their future had finally begun. Life slowly started to change after that day, because Ngozi was now looking for a job, and Leo knew that this was another important step in her journey. So he began to reach out to some of his customers who owned businesses and offices, people who trusted him because of his honesty and good work. He spoke to them about Ngozi, telling them how hardworking and smart she was, and after some time, one of them agreed to give her an opportunity. When Ngozi got the job, she was very happy, and Leo was even happier because he felt like he had played a part in opening that door for her, and he believed that this was the beginning of the life they had both dreamed about for so long. The job came with a better environment, new people, and a different lifestyle that Ngozi was not used to before. And at first, everything seemed fine. One evening, as they sat together after a long day, Ngozi held Leo's hand and looked at him with a soft smile on her face. And she said, "Leo, I don't know how to thank you for everything you have done for me, because without you, I would not be here today. And I promise you that I will never forget you, no matter where life takes me." Leo smiled gently and replied, "You don't need to thank me, Ngozi, because I did it out of love, and all I want is for us to be happy together in the future." Ngozi nodded her head and leaned closer to him as she said, "That future is still ours, Leo. Nothing is going to change that." Those words settled deeply in Leo's heart, giving him peace and confidence. And as he walked back to his small workshop that night, he felt lighter than ever before, because he believed that everything was finally falling into place, just as they had planned. But as the days began to pass, and Ngozi settled into her new job and new environment, small changes started to appear quietly, changes that were not very clear at first, but strong enough to slowly begin shifting the direction of their story. But as the days turned into weeks, and the weeks slowly became months, the small changes that had started quietly began to grow into something Leo could no longer ignore, even though he tried his best to pretend everything was still the same between them. Ngozi was now living a different kind of life, one that was far from the dusty roadside where Leo spent his days, and every morning she dressed in neat office clothes, spoke to new people, and moved in places Leo had never been to before. At first, Leo was happy to see her grow, because this was exactly what he had worked so hard for. And whenever she told him stories about her office, he would listen carefully with a smile, even if he did not fully understand everything she was talking about. But slowly, he began to notice that the calls between them were no longer as frequent as they used to be, and the long conversations they once shared started becoming short and rushed, as if Ngozi always had something more important to attend to. There were days when Leo would call her phone, and it would ring for a long time without answer, and when she finally called back, her voice sounded distant, like someone who was already halfway gone, and she would quickly explain that she was busy at work or out with colleagues. And even though Leo tried to understand, something inside him began to feel uneasy. Ngozi also started visiting him less often, and when she did, she no longer stayed for long or laughed as freely as before, and sometimes she would look around his workshop with a quiet discomfort on her face, as if the place that once felt normal to her had suddenly become too small for her new life. Leo noticed these things, but he kept telling himself that it was just part of her adjusting to a new environment, and that with time, everything would return to normal. One evening, Leo closed his workshop earlier than usual because he had not seen Ngozi in many days, and he decided to visit her at her new place, hoping to surprise her and spend some time together like they used to. When he got there, he found her dressed in fine clothes, preparing to go out. And for a moment, she looked surprised to see him standing at the door. Leo smiled softly and said, Ngozi, I have missed you. I thought I should come and see you since you have been very busy these days. Ngozi forced a small smile, but her body language was different, and she replied,
Leo, you should have called before coming. I am actually on my way out with some colleagues from work.
Leo paused for a moment, trying to hide the disappointment in his eyes, and then he said gently,
It's okay. I just wanted to spend some time with you, even if it is for a short while.
Ngozi hesitated slightly before responding.
Leo, things are not the same anymore. My work is demanding, and I have to maintain a certain level now. I cannot always be available like before.
Those words did not sound harsh on the surface, but they carried a weight that settled deeply in Leo's heart. And as he stood there looking at her, he began to feel something he had never felt before. A quiet fear that maybe the future he had been holding on to was slowly slipping away. As Ngozi stepped out that evening, leaving Leo standing alone, he watched her walk into a world that seemed to be pulling her further and further away from him. And for the first time, he could no longer convince himself that everything was still okay. As Ngozi stepped out that evening and left Leo standing alone, he remained there for a while, thinking deeply about everything that had been happening between them. And for the first time, he decided that he could no longer keep quiet or pretend that things were still normal. The distance, the coldness, and the way she spoke to him had all become too clear to ignore, and he knew he needed answers. The next day, Leo went back to his workshop, but he could not focus on his work because his mind was full of questions. So later in the evening, he called Ngozi and asked if they could meet and talk properly. And after some hesitation, she agreed. They met at a quiet place, and the moment they sat down, there was a silence between them that felt heavy, like two people who used to understand each other, but were now struggling to connect. Leo looked at her carefully, trying to find the Ngozi he once knew, and then he spoke in a calm but serious voice. Ngozi, I feel like something is wrong, and I don't understand what is happening to us, because you are not the same anymore, and I need you to tell me the truth. Ngozi did not respond immediately, and she looked away for a moment, before finally speaking in a slow and controlled voice, as if she had already made up her mind about everything. Leo, you are not wrong. Things have changed, and I think it is better if we accept that instead of pretending. Leo felt his heart tighten, but he continued. Changed how, Ngozi? Because we had plans. We had a future we were building together, and I thought we were still moving in that direction. Ngozi took a deep breath and then looked straight at him as she spoke words that would change everything. Leo, I have grown. My life is different now. The people I meet, the places I go, everything has changed, and I cannot continue living the same life I used to live before. Leo listened quietly, hoping she would say something that would still give him hope, but instead, she continued. You are a good man, Leo, and I will never forget what you did for me. But the truth is that I cannot see myself settling down with a mechanic anymore, because my status now is not the same, and I have to think about my future. Those words hit Leo deeply, not because she shouted them, but because she said them so calmly, as if what they had shared meant very little now. He stared at her for a moment, trying to understand how everything had changed so quickly, and then he asked in a low voice, So after everything, this is what it comes down to, my job, my level, that is what matters now? Ngozi did not deny it, and instead she simply said, Leo, I am being honest with you, and it is better this way than to continue something that no longer fits. There was nothing more to say after that, because the truth had already been spoken, and it was clear that Ngozi had made her decision long before that conversation. Leo slowly stood up, feeling a quiet pain inside him. Not the kind that makes noise, but the kind that stays deep and heavy. As he walked away from that meeting, he did not look back, because he already understood that the woman he had loved and sacrificed for was no longer walking the same path with him. And in that moment, everything he had hoped for came to a silent end. As he walked away from that meeting, Leo did not look back, because he already knew that nothing he said or did would change what had just happened. And for the first time in many years, he felt completely alone. Not because he had no one around him, but because the one person he had built his life around was no longer there. The next few days were very difficult for him, because everything around him reminded him of Ngozi, from the road he used to walk to see her, to the small moments they had shared when life was still simple and full of hope. Even at his workshop, where he used to find peace in his work, he now found himself lost in thoughts, sometimes holding a tool in his hand without even knowing what he was supposed to fix. Leo tried to keep going with his daily life because he had no other choice, and slowly he returned to his routine of repairing cars and speaking to customers. But something inside him had changed, and even though he still did his work well, the joy he once had was no longer there. People who knew him began to notice the difference, but Leo did not explain anything to them, because some pain is easier to carry in silence. One afternoon, one of his regular customers, an older man who had watched Leo grow over the years, came to the workshop and noticed that Leo was not himself, and after his car was fixed, he decided to sit with him for a moment and ask what was wrong. Leo hesitated at first, but then he spoke slowly, as if the words were heavy in his mouth, and he said, "I gave everything to someone I believed in. I supported her. I stood by her. And now that she has become something better, she says I am no longer enough." The man listened quietly and then replied in a calm voice, "Life does not always return what we give, Leo, and sometimes people move on without looking back. But that does not mean what you did was wasted, because your actions show the kind of person you are, not the kind of person she chose to become." Leo nodded slightly, understanding the words, but still feeling the weight of everything that had happened. And after that day, he stopped expecting anything to change or any kind of apology to come his way. Meanwhile, Ngozi continued living her new life without looking back, moving forward with her career, meeting new people, and building a future that no longer included Leo. And there was no sign of regret or consequence following her decision, because sometimes life does not balance things the way people expect. As time continued to pass, Leo slowly accepted the reality of what had happened. Not because it became easier, but because he had no other choice. And even though the pain remained, he began to understand that he had to find a way to keep moving forward, even if it meant leaving behind everything he once believed in. As time continued to pass, Leo slowly learned how to live with the silence that Ngozi had left behind. And even though the pain did not disappear completely, it became something he could carry without it stopping his life. Every morning, he still opened his workshop, picked up his tools, and continued working. Not because everything was fine, but because he understood that life had to go on whether he was ready or not. Little by little, Leo began to find himself again in the same place where he had once lost everything. And although he did not become rich or suddenly successful, he became stronger in a quiet way, the kind of strength that comes from accepting what cannot be changed. He stopped thinking about what he had lost and started focusing on what he still had: his work, his name, and the respect people had for him. There were moments when he still remembered Ngozi, especially when he saw young couples passing by or when he heard people talking about love and promises. But those memories no longer broke him the way they used to, because he had already faced the truth and made peace with it in his own way. Ngozi, on the other hand, continued with her life just as she had planned, growing in her career, living comfortably, and moving in circles that matched the life she had chosen. And there was no moment where everything came crashing down for her. No sudden regret that forced her to look back, because sometimes life does not return pain to those who cause it. One afternoon, as Leo sat outside his workshop watching the road like he often did after a long day, he saw a car pass by, and for a brief moment, he thought he saw Ngozi inside. But he did not stand up or try to confirm it, because he had already reached a place where looking back no longer mattered. He simply looked away, picked up his tools, and continued with his work. And in that simple action, there was a quiet understanding that his life was no longer tied to what had happened before, but to what he chose to do next. And so the story did not end with revenge or regret, but with a simple truth that not every sacrifice is rewarded. Not every love lasts forever. And sometimes, the strongest thing a person can do is to accept what life gives them and keep moving forward without looking back.